I stood in Sharon's office. 3 months of work spread across her desk, while she looked at me like I was something stuck to her shoe. Two of my male colleagues leaned against the wall, arms crossed, smirking. Sharon picked up my client acquisition strategy and let it drop. "Respect isn't given to people like you," she said, her laugh sharp and cold. "It's commanded by those who deserve it." The men exchanged glances. I said nothing. I walked back to my desk, placed my badge beside my keyboard, and gathered my things in silence. 30 minutes later, I sat in my car, hands trembling on the steering wheel, jobless and terrified but strangely free. The Phoenix heat hit me as I drove home that afternoon, my mind racing faster than my heart. I had just walked away from a steady paycheck, health insurance, and 4 years of building what I thought was a career. My small apartment felt smaller when I unlocked the door, knowing I had exactly 2 months of rent saved and no plan beyond the rage burning in my chest. Jackson looked up from his laptop when I walked in. He worked as a freelance graphic designer, pulling in maybe $1,200 a month when things were good. I was the one who paid most of our bills, covered groceries, kept us afloat. His face went pale when I told him what happened. "You quit?" he said, standing up. "Without talking to me first?" "She humiliated me in front of everyone," I said, dropping my bag. "She dismissed 3 months of work like it was garbage." "But we need your income, Harriet." He ran his hands through his hair. "What are we supposed to do now?" I wanted him to be angry for me, to understand why I couldn't stay in that building another second. Instead, he looked at me like I had just set our life on fire. Maybe I had. That first week, I barely slept. I pulled out the client acquisition strategy I had created, read through every page, every data point, every recommendation. It was brilliant. I knew it was brilliant. Sharon knew it too, which was exactly why she had destroyed it in front of witnesses. If she couldn't take credit for my work anymore, she would make sure no one else saw its value. By day 3, I made a decision. I would start my own marketing consultancy. I would specialize in small business brand development, the exact niche where I had always excelled but that my former firm treated as beneath them. I would prove that my work had value, with or without Sharon's approval. The LLC paperwork for Foster Strategy Group cost $120. The basic website and business cards maxed out my first credit card at $1,800. The second card covered printing costs and a post office box for 2 months. I was burning through money I didn't have, betting everything on myself. I reached out to everyone in my network, carefully crafting messages that explained my departure without badmouthing my former employer. Professional, dignified. 3 former colleagues agreed to meet me for coffee, and their sympathy felt genuine enough. But one of them, Dylan, pulled me aside as we were leaving the cafe. "You should know," he said, glancing around. "Sharon's been telling people you couldn't handle the pressure, that you had some kind of breakdown and just walked out." My stomach dropped. "That's not what happened." "I know," Dylan said. "But she's making sure everyone hears her version first." I drove home that afternoon understanding that Sharon wasn't content with humiliating me in private. She was systematically destroying my reputation across the entire Phoenix marketing community. Every contact I reached out to would hear her lies before they heard my pitch. By the end of week 2, I had sent 43 emails and made 17 phone calls. I had 0 clients, and a growing sense of panic that maybe Jackson was right. Maybe I had made a terrible mistake. Then Grace called. She owned a small bakery in Tempe, had gotten my name from a mutual acquaintance, and needed help with her social media presence. The budget was $800 total. It would barely cover my portion of rent, but it was a start. I threw everything into that project. 16-hour days researching her competition, understanding her customer base, crafting a content strategy that would showcase what made her bakery special. I shot photos, wrote captions, scheduled posts, engaged with every comment. Grace's warm personality came through in every piece of content, and her followers started growing. Within 2 weeks, her foot traffic increased by 30%. She called me crying happy tears, saying she had never seen her shop so busy. She immediately referred me to 3 other small business owners who needed similar help. For the first time since walking out of Sharon's office, I felt like I could breathe. Maybe this would work. Maybe I could actually build something real. Jackson remained distant, making comments about real jobs and financial stability whenever I worked late. But I pushed past his negativity, focused on my new clients, let myself believe that the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. Certified mail, official legal letterhead. My hands shook as I opened it. Cease and desist. My former company was threatening to sue me for $75,000, claiming I had stolen proprietary client acquisition methods. They alleged I had accessed confidential files before quitting and was now using their intellectual property to compete against them. The letter specifically mentioned that Sharon had documented evidence of my theft. They demanded I shut down Foster Strategy Group immediately and destroy all materials related to my business. I read it 3 times, my vision blurring. The client acquisition strategy I had created was based on principles I learned getting my degree, methods that were taught in every marketing program in the country. There was nothing proprietary about it. But that didn't matter. They were coming after me with lawyers and money I couldn't match. I called every attorney I could find. Most wanted retainers of $5,000 or more just to review the case. I had maybe $600 left in my checking account. Grace's payment wouldn't clear for another week, and my other potential clients were suddenly not returning my calls. Finally, I found a legal aid clinic that connected me with Garrett, a young attorney willing to take my case pro bono because he believed the lawsuit was baseless harassment. He was 28, earnest and honest about the challenges ahead. Even frivolous lawsuits can destroy you, he said in our first meeting. They know you can't afford to fight this. They're counting on you folding before we even get to discovery. So what do? We fight, he said. We call their bluff and make them prove these claims. But you need to understand, this could take months, maybe a year, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. He was right about that. The lawsuit became a shadow following me everywhere. Within days, word spread through the small business community I was trying to break into. 2 of my 3 new clients called to cancel, apologizing but saying they couldn't risk being associated with legal troubles. Only Grace remained loyal, insisting she didn't care what some corporate firm claimed. But Grace's $800 a month wasn't enough. I took a night shift at a coffee shop near Arizona State University, making $11 an hour plus tips. I worked from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, came home to shower, then spent my days working on Grace's account and trying to salvage my business. I was sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, living on coffee and the determination not to let Sharon win. Jackson grew increasingly hostile. We fought about money constantly. He complained that I was never home, that my ego trip was dragging both of us down, that I should just settle and get a normal job. Each argument left deeper cuts, and I started sleeping on the couch to avoid him. My website traffic mysteriously tanked. When I investigated, I found negative reviews appearing on multiple sites, claiming I was a thief and a fraud. The language was similar across all of them, clearly coordinated. Garrett helped me trace the IP addresses, but we couldn't definitively prove who was behind the campaign, even though we both knew. The stress manifested physically. I lost 12 pounds in 3 weeks. My hands shook constantly. I developed a twitch in my left eye that wouldn't go away. Emma, my older sister, begged me to quit fighting and just move on, but I couldn't. If I gave up now, Sharon would have stolen not just my work, but my entire future. Garrett filed our response to the lawsuit, demanding that my former company produce the evidence Sharon claimed to have. We argued that basic marketing principles couldn't be proprietary, that I had created all strategies using my own education and expertise, and that this was clearly retaliatory harassment. For 2 weeks, their lawyers went silent. Garrett said that was actually a good sign, that maybe they realized they had no case. I let myself hope. Then Jackson ended us. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I had just gotten home from a particularly brutal shift at the coffee shop where a customer had yelled at me for 10 minutes about the temperature of his latte. I was exhausted, defeated, barely holding myself together. Jackson was packing boxes when I walked in. "What are you doing?" I asked, though somewhere deep down I already knew. "I'm leaving," he said, not looking at me. "I've been seeing someone else for the past month. Someone with stability, with an actual future. I can't do this anymore. Harriet, I can't watch you destroy yourself over some pointless grudge." The words hit me like physical blows. "A month?" I whispered. "You've been cheating on me this whole time? You've been so obsessed with your lawsuit. You barely noticed I existed," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "This isn't working." It hasn't been working. He was gone within 3 days, taking the couch we bought together, the television, half the dishes. The apartment echoed with emptiness, and I found myself grateful for the night shifts that kept me away from it. But the universe wasn't done with me yet. The day after Jackson moved out, I received an amended lawsuit. My former company had increased the damages to $150,000. They now claimed I had also attempted to poach clients before leaving, a complete fabrication. Sharon had submitted a sworn affidavit with what appeared to be records of client contacts I had allegedly made in my final weeks at the firm. I stared at the documents, knowing every word was a lie. But Sharon had created evidence. She had manufactured a paper trail that looked legitimate, and I had no way to prove otherwise. I called Emma, sobbing so hard I could barely speak. She drove over immediately, held me while I broke down completely, told me I could come stay with her family until I figured things out. I had never felt so utterly defeated, so thoroughly destroyed by another person's malice. "Why is she doing this?" I asked Emma through tears. "Why does she hate me so much?" "Because you're good at what you do," Emma said. "And people like her can't stand anyone who threatens to expose them." That night, lying on Emma's couch while her 3 kids slept upstairs, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if Sharon had already won. Maybe there was no coming back from this. Maybe some battles weren't meant to be fought. But somewhere in the exhausted fog of my mind, a small spark of rage still burned. I wasn't dead yet, and as long as I was breathing, I could still fight. Moving in with Emma was supposed to be temporary, just a few weeks until I got back on my feet. But weeks turned into a month, and I was still sleeping on her couch, still working double shifts at the coffee shop, still struggling to keep my one client business alive. Emma never complained, but I saw the strain in her face. Her house was small. Her 3 kids were loud and energetic, and I was a broke, depressed ghost haunting their living room. The depositions were scheduled for 6 weeks out. Garrett warned me to prepare for hostile questioning, to expect Sharon's lawyers to twist everything I said. He coached me on staying calm, on answering only what was asked, on not letting them provoke me into emotional reactions. But I couldn't focus on preparation because I couldn't stop thinking about the why. Why was Sharon so determined to destroy me? The lawsuit was costing her company money, generating negative attention, dragging on far longer than made financial sense. This had become personal for her, vindictive in a way that went beyond protecting her reputation. I started digging into Sharon's history at the company. I reached out quietly to former colleagues, asking careful questions about her career trajectory. Marcus, who worked in the analytics department, agreed to meet me at a park during his lunch break. He looked nervous, kept glancing around like he expected someone to be watching. "Why all the secrecy?" I asked. "Because Sharon has eyes everywhere. he said. And she destroys anyone who crosses her. He told me that Sharon had been passed over for promotion to regional director 3 months before I quit. The position went to someone from outside the company, someone with an MBA from Stanford, and a track record of successful campaigns. Sharon had been furious, convinced she deserved the role. She needed a win, Marcus explained. Something to prove to upper management that she belonged at that level. When you quit, she lost her best strategist. You were the one making her look good. The pieces clicked into place. Sharon had been presenting my work as her own for years, using my strategies to build her reputation. When I walked out, she lost access to the talent that made her successful. The lawsuit was her way of discrediting me before I could expose her theft, of ensuring no one would believe anything I said about her taking credit for my ideas. How long had she been doing this? I asked. Marcus shrugged. Years, probably. She did it to me too, back when I was in her department. Took my market analysis and presented it as her own research. When I confronted her privately, she threatened to fire me if I ever mentioned it again. Why didn't you report her? Because I have a mortgage and 2 kids, he said quietly. Because she has connections, and I'm replaceable. You learn to keep your head down and survive. I left that meeting feeling sick. Sharon had built her entire career on stolen work, and the company either didn't know or didn't care. She was protected by her results. Never mind that those results came from exploiting the people beneath her. Garrett subpoenaed my old emails through the discovery process. When they arrived, I spent 3 days reviewing thousands of messages, looking for proof that I had created the strategies Sharon claimed as her own. I found email chains showing my original ideas, my research, my recommendations. But when I cross-referenced them with the company's official records, something was wrong. The files had been altered. Timestamps changed. My name removed from documents. Sharon's name added as primary author. Someone had systematically gone through the company's system and rewritten history. This is bad, Garrett said when I showed him. If we can't prove the original authorship, it's your word against their documentation. I felt the walls closing in again. Sharon had been thorough. She hadn't just stolen my work. She had erased me from it entirely. Then, on a Tuesday morning, I received an anonymous email. The sender address was a random string of letters and numbers. The subject line read, "She did this to me too." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was an encrypted file and a brief message. Original documents. Unaltered. Use them to destroy her. It took me 20 minutes to decrypt the file with the password provided. Inside were copies of the same strategies I had created. But these versions still showed my name, my original timestamps, the metadata proving I was the author. Someone had kept copies before Sharon altered the company system. I tried to trace the sender, but the email account deleted itself minutes after I received the message. Whoever sent this wanted to remain completely anonymous, protected from Sharon's retaliation. I took everything to Garrett immediately. He brought in a senior partner to review the evidence. They confirmed it was legitimate, that we could use it to prove fraud and perjury. But without knowing the source, Sharon's lawyers would challenge its authenticity, claim it was fabricated. This helps us, Garrett said, but it's not a smoking gun. We need the person who sent this to testify. That night, I drove back to Emma's house at 2 a.m. after my coffee shop shift. The street was quiet, dark. I parked in the driveway, exhausted to my bones. My car windows exploded. The sound was deafening. Glass rained over me as I screamed and ducked. When the noise stopped, I sat up slowly, shaking, bleeding from small cuts on my arms. Both rear windows were shattered. All 4 tires were slashed. I stumbled out of the car, my legs barely holding me. A white piece of paper was stuck to my windshield, held down by the wiper blade. I pulled it free with trembling hands. The message was printed in plain black letters. Drop it or it gets worse. Emma called the police. They came, took a report, photographed the damage. The officer was sympathetic but honest. Without cameras or witnesses, there's not much we can do. Could be random vandalism. It's not random, I said, showing him the note. He bagged it as evidence but warned me that proving who did it would be nearly impossible. Do you have somewhere else you can stay? Someone you've made angry who might escalate? I laughed. A bitter sound with no humor in it. Yeah, I said. I have someone. The car repairs cost $900 even after my insurance deductible. I didn't have $900. Emma loaned it to me against my protests, adding it to the growing list of debts I couldn't repay. My coffee shop manager cut my hours the following week, claiming corporate restructuring. I suspected someone had gotten to him, but I couldn't prove it. I was drowning. Every time I thought I had found solid ground, Sharon pulled it out from under me. And the message was clear. She would keep hurting me until I gave up. The question was whether I would break before she ran out of ways to hurt me. The police couldn't help me. The note was generic enough that it couldn't be definitively linked to Sharon or my lawsuit. They increased patrols in Emma's neighborhood for a few days, but that was all they could do. I started sleeping with my phone next to me, jumping at every sound, checking the windows compulsively. The paranoia was exhausting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Sharon was watching, waiting for her next opportunity to strike. My insurance company fought me on the car claim, citing the deductible and arguing about coverage. It took 3 weeks to get the check, during which I borrowed Emma's minivan to get to work and court appointments. The $900 repair bill became $1,100 after the shop found additional damage. I maxed out my third credit card to cover the difference. The coffee shop hours kept getting cut. First from 30 hours a week to 25, then down to 18. My manager, a guy named Brian who had always been decent to me, wouldn't make eye contact when he gave me the new schedule. Is this about me? I asked him directly. Did someone contact you? I can't talk about personnel decisions, he said, which wasn't a denial. I was making maybe $600 a month now between the coffee shop and Grace's small retainer. My rent alone was $800. Emma refused to take money from me, which only made me feel worse. I was 32 years old, living on my sister's couch, unable to support myself, watching everything I had worked for disintegrate. The legal costs kept mounting despite Garrett's pro bono work. Court filing fees, discovery costs, copying charges, expert witness consultations. My former company was deliberately dragging out the process, requesting extensions, filing frivolous motions, forcing us to respond to each one. Garrett explained this was a common intimidation tactic in corporate litigation. They had unlimited resources and expensive lawyers on retainer. They could bleed me dry without it costing them anything beyond what they already paid their legal team. The total costs climbed toward $5,000 in fees alone, not counting the emotional and physical toll. I had borrowed from Emma, maxed out 4 credit cards, and was still short. Garrett's firm was covering some expenses, but they couldn't cover everything. Then my body gave out. It happened on a Thursday afternoon at the coffee shop. I was making an iced latte, going through the motions automatically because my brain had stopped fully engaging hours ago. The room tilted sideways. The floor rushed up to meet me. I heard shouting, felt hands on me, saw the ceiling tiles spinning above. I woke up in an emergency room with an IV in my arm and Emma gripping my hand. The doctor said it was severe dehydration and exhaustion, that my blood pressure had dropped dangerously low, that I was running my body into the ground. They kept me overnight for observation, pumped me full of fluids, ran tests to make sure I hadn't done permanent damage. The bill was $3,200, even with my minimal insurance. I stared at the number and started laughing, a hysterical sound that scared the nurse checking my vitals. $3,200 for one night in a hospital bed because I was too poor and too stressed to take care of myself. I was now roughly $12,000 in debt, not counting the lawsuit. I had no way to pay any of it. My credit score had plummeted. I couldn't get another credit card if I tried. The financial hole I was in had become a grave, and I was lying at the bottom waiting for someone to shovel dirt on top. But I had to keep trying. I reached out to potential clients, pitched 6 different small business owners on my services. All 6 rejected me. 3 weeks later, I discovered why. Someone was contacting my prospects before my meetings, sending anonymous messages warning them about my ethical issues and the ongoing lawsuit against me. One potential client forwarded me the message they had received. It was sent from a burner phone number that disappeared after one use. Sharon was systematically destroying every opportunity before I could even pursue it. She was making sure I couldn't earn money, couldn't build my business, couldn't survive long enough to fight her in court. Emma found me crying in her bathroom at 2 a.m, curled up on the floor, unable to breathe through the panic attack. She held me while I sobbed, rocking me like she used to when we were kids and I had nightmares. "Maybe you should settle," she whispered. "This is killing you, Harriet. It's not worth dying over." "If I settle, she wins," I gasped out between sobs. "She destroys me and gets away with everything." "But you'll be alive," Emma said. "You'll be free of this nightmare." We argued about it for an hour. She meant well, wanted to protect me, couldn't stand watching me suffer anymore. But she didn't understand that settling would mean admitting to theft I didn't commit, paying money I didn't have, and agreeing never to work in marketing in Arizona again. It would mean letting Sharon erase me completely. I moved out of Emma's house the next week. Not because she asked me to, but because I couldn't take the pity in her eyes anymore. I found a room for rent in a house near the university, $300 a month, shared with 4 college students who were never home. I was the oldest person in the house by a decade, sleeping in a 10 by 10 room with secondhand furniture, wondering how my life had become this. I sold my laptop to make rent, a 2-year-old MacBook that got me $450 from a pawn shop. I worked from the public library after that, using their computers, their Wi-Fi, their electricity. The librarians learned my name, started saving the corner desk for me, bringing me coffee sometimes, because they could see I was barely holding on. The deposition date arrived like an execution. I put on the one professional outfit I still owned, met Garrett at the law offices downtown, and prepared to be torn apart. Sharon was already there when we walked in, flanked by 3 attorneys in suits that probably cost more than my car. She looked polished, confident, powerful. She smiled when she saw me, a cold smile that said she knew exactly how broken I was. The deposition lasted 6 hours. Sharon's lawyers were brutal, asking the same questions 17 different ways, trying to trip me up, make me contradict myself. They went through my work history, my education, my personal relationships. They asked about Jackson, about Emma, about every decision I had made since quitting. They treated me like a criminal, their voices dripping with contempt. Then they produced the evidence. Printed emails that appeared to show me discussing taking clients before I quit. Detailed records of contacts I had allegedly made, proposals I had supposedly stolen, strategies I had planned to use against the company. The documents looked legitimate, complete with headers, timestamps, and email chains that seemed to prove every accusation. I knew they were fabricated. I had never sent those emails, never made those contacts, never planned any of what they claimed. But sitting in that conference room, looking at page after page of manufactured evidence, I felt reality bending. The lies were so detailed, so convincing, that I started questioning my own memory. Sharon watched me the entire time, her expression never changing. She was enjoying this. Every moment of my confusion, every flash of fear that crossed my face, fed something dark in her. She had orchestrated all of this, spent months building a false narrative, and now she was watching it destroy me. When it finally ended, Garrett pulled me aside in the hallway. His face was grim. "The fabricated emails are a problem," he said. "They look real. We can challenge them, but without concrete proof they're fake. A jury might believe them." "They're lies," I said, my voice hollow. "All of it is lies." "I know," Garrett said. "But Sharon's good at this. She's had time to prepare. We need to find something that proves these documents are falsified, or we're in serious trouble." That night, I received a certified letter at my new address, settlement offer. If I admitted wrongdoing, paid $25,000, signed a non-disclosure agreement, and agreed never to work in marketing in Arizona again, they would drop the lawsuit. If I refused, they would proceed to trial, which would cost me over $100,000 in legal fees and could take years to resolve. I had 72 hours to decide. I sat on my cheap mattress in my tiny room, listening to my college student roommates laugh and play video games in the living room. And I knew I was beaten. I had no money for a trial, no way to fight a company with unlimited resources, no proof strong enough to overcome Sharon's manufactured evidence. She had won, and she knew it. I spent the next 2 days in a fog. I drafted an acceptance letter to the settlement offer 7 times, each version making me hate myself more. $25,000 I didn't have, an admission of guilt for theft I didn't commit, and a permanent ban from the career I loved. Sharon would walk away clean, while I spent years paying off a debt for crimes that existed only in her lies. Emma called every few hours, checking on me, offering to help me figure out payment plans. Her kindness made it worse somehow. I was going to need her help to afford this surrender, going to need my family to bail me out of the trap Sharon had built. On the 3rd day, with 6 hours left before the settlement deadline, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Harriet Foster?" A man's voice. Familiar, but I couldn't place it. "Yes? It's Marcus. From Analytics. We met at the park. Can you meet me today? Right now? It's urgent, and I can't talk on the phone." My heart started racing. "What's this about?" "Sharon," he said, "and the evidence you need. But we have to meet in person, away from anyone who might see us." We agreed on a coffee shop in Scottsdale, 30 minutes away. I borrowed my roommate's car, drove there with my stomach in knots, found Marcus already waiting at a corner booth. He looked different than when I'd seen him a month ago. Thinner, older somehow, with dark circles under his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat down. "I know you're running out of time." 6 hours until I have to accept their settlement, I said. "So yeah, whatever this is, I need it now." Marcus pulled a thumb drive from his pocket and slid it across the table. "I'm the one who sent you the anonymous email, with the original documents." I stared at him. "Why didn't you identify yourself?" "Because I was afraid," he said simply. "Sharon has ended careers. I have a family to support. But then, I got diagnosed with cancer 3 weeks ago. Stage 3. Treatment starts next month, and suddenly I realized I don't have time to be afraid anymore." "I'm so sorry," I said. The settlement offer temporarily forgotten. He waved it off. "It's treatable. Good prognosis. But it made me think about what matters. You know? And watching Sharon destroy you the way she tried to destroy me 7 years ago, I couldn't stay silent anymore." "What's on the drive?" "Everything," Marcus said. "Original documents with metadata proving you created those strategies. Emails showing Sharon systematically altering files after you quit. Records of her doing this to 3 other employees over the past 6 years. Financial documents showing how she inflated her performance metrics using other people's work. And her personal email communications where she explicitly discussed burying you with the lawsuit." I couldn't breathe. "How did you get her personal emails?" "She accidentally saved them to a shared company folder I had administrative access to. She was emailing her uncle about you, about the lawsuit strategy. about making sure you could never work again. She got sloppy because she thought she was untouchable. Her uncle? The CEO, Marcus said. James Whitmore. Sharon's his niece. That's how she got hired. How she keeps getting promoted despite complaints. Family connections. The corruption went even deeper than I thought. Why are you helping me now? Because I have a new job starting in Colorado in 2 weeks. I'm leaving Arizona, leaving the company, starting over. And before I go, I want to make sure Sharon finally faces consequences for what she's done. He leaned forward. But you need to understand something. If you use this evidence, they'll know it came from someone inside. They might figure out it was me. I'm willing to take that risk. But I need you to be ready for what comes next. What comes next? A war, Marcus said. They won't settle quietly once they see you have this. They'll fight harder, get nastier, try to bury you under motions and delays. You'll need to be prepared to go the distance. I thought about the settlement offer, about accepting defeat in 6 hours. Then I thought about Sharon's face during my deposition, the satisfaction in her eyes as she watched me suffer. I'm ready, I said, taking the thumb drive. Let's burn her whole world down. Marcus smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen from him. There's one more thing. I'm willing to testify. In court, in depositions, wherever you need me. I'll be in Colorado, but I'll come back to make sure this sticks. I wanted to hug him, cry, thank him properly. Instead, I just gripped his hand across the table. You're saving my life. You're saving your own life, he said. I'm just giving you the weapon. I drove straight to Garrett's office. He called in the senior partner, and they spent 4 hours reviewing every file on the drive. At midnight, they confirmed it was legitimate and devastating. We could prove fraud, perjury, witness tampering, and civil conspiracy. We could get the lawsuit dismissed and file a countersuit for damages. Garrett filed an emergency motion first thing the next morning, introducing the new evidence and requesting immediate sanctions against Sharon and the company. The settlement deadline passed without me accepting. 6 hours later, I received an email from the company's head attorney. The tone had completely changed. Conciliatory. Urgent. They wanted to meet immediately to discuss resolution options. The power dynamic had shifted in the span of a morning, but my personal life was still in shambles. That afternoon, my landlord knocked on my door with an eviction notice. The house had building code violations. The whole place was being condemned. Everyone had 2 days to move out. I had less than $300 in my bank account and nowhere to go. I couldn't ask Emma again. Couldn't burden her more than I already had. So that night, I packed my few possessions into my car and drove to a parking lot near the public library. I reclined the driver's seat, covered myself with a jacket, and tried to sleep. This was my life now. Potentially winning a lawsuit while homeless. Having evidence that could destroy Sharon while I couldn't afford a motel room. The irony was so sharp it cut. My phone buzzed at 2 a.m. Email from the company's head attorney. We need to meet tomorrow. Please bring your counsel. We believe we can resolve this matter to everyone's satisfaction. I sat in my car, reading that email over and over, and started crying. Not sad tears, not happy tears, just exhaustion tears. I was at my absolute lowest point, sleeping in a parking lot, broke and broken. But I had finally put fear in them. They knew I could prove everything now. They knew Marcus would testify. They knew their carefully constructed lies were about to be exposed. Sharon had tried to destroy me completely. She had almost succeeded. But she had made one critical mistake. She had underestimated how much I was willing to lose to make sure she lost, too. I cleaned up in a gas station bathroom the next morning, using hand soap and paper towels, changing into my professional clothes in a stall while someone's preschooler banged on the door asking when I'd be done. This was the reality of being homeless with a corporate meeting scheduled. You made do. Garrett met me at the law offices downtown. The company had sent their top 3 attorneys, the ones who usually handled major litigation. They looked uncomfortable, which was a change from their usual arrogance. "We've reviewed the new evidence," the lead attorney said, not quite meeting my eyes, "and we believe there may have been some miscommunication about the origins of certain materials." "Miscommunication?" I repeated flatly. "Your client accused me of theft, sued me for $150,000, and attempted to destroy my career based on fabricated evidence. That's not miscommunication. That's fraud." They offered to drop the entire lawsuit immediately. No settlement payment required. Clean dismissal. All I had to do was sign a non-disclosure agreement and make this go away quietly. "No," I said. The attorneys looked genuinely surprised. "Miss Foster, this is a very generous offer considering I want my name fully cleared," I interrupted. "A public acknowledgement from your company that the allegations were false, an apology, and an investigation into how fabricated evidence made it into a legal filing." They argued for 20 minutes, trying to pressure me into accepting their terms. But I had nothing left to lose, which made me impossible to intimidate. Garrett backed me completely, pointing out that we now had grounds for a substantial countersuit and that the evidence of corporate fraud would be very interesting to the Arizona Bar Association. The meeting ended with no agreement. They promised to take this back to their client and be in touch. I could see the fear in their eyes now. The tables had turned so fast they hadn't had time to adjust. Word spread internally about the evidence against Sharon. I started getting anonymous tips from current employees, people who had suffered under her for years, and were thrilled to see her finally facing consequences. She was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Her access to company systems was revoked. Her office was being searched by HR and legal. Sharon started calling me directly. The first few calls were aggressive, angry, accusing me of ruining her life. I let them go to voicemail, saved every recording. Then the tone changed. She started pleading, claiming she was being made a scapegoat, that upper management had known what she was doing all along and had encouraged it. "Please," she said in one message, her voice breaking. "I have a mortgage, a daughter in college. They're going to fire me, and I'll lose everything. Can't we work something out? I can give you money. Whatever you want." I blocked her number. Not out of mercy, but because listening to her beg made me feel things I didn't want to feel. Satisfaction, yes, but also a disturbing kind of pity. She had destroyed herself. I had just provided the evidence. With Marcus's testimony and the documentary proof, Garrett filed our countersuit. We were seeking $250,000 in damages for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud, conspiracy, and malicious prosecution. The local business media picked up the story, framing it as a classic David versus Goliath case. Small business owner fights back against corporate giant. The publicity was a double-edged sword. Several small business owners reached out, offering to hire me, impressed by my resilience and fighting spirit. But my former employer's corporate office got involved, sending even more aggressive attorneys, threatening to drag the case through appeals for years, bury me in depositions and document requests. They had unlimited resources and were clearly willing to use them to avoid a public trial. "They're trying to outlast you," Garrett explained. "Make this so expensive and time-consuming that you give up." "I'm homeless," I said. "I'm working night shifts at a coffee shop. I have nothing left for them to take. How much worse can it get?" I found out the next day. 3 more former employees came forward publicly with their own stories about Sharon. One was now a vice president at a competitor firm, highly credible, willing to testify about similar misconduct from 5 years ago. Another had documentation of complaints she had filed with HR that were ignored. The third had been forced out of the company after confronting Sharon and was eager for the chance to finally be heard. The story went regional. The Phoenix Business Journal ran a feature about systematic workplace abuse and corporate cover-ups. Local news picked it up as a human interest piece about standing up to powerful institutions. My phone rang constantly with media requests. The company's stock price dropped 2% in one day on the negative publicity. 2 major clients publicly dropped them, citing ethical concerns. The board of directors called for an independent investigation. I was still sleeping in my car, but I was winning. Then the CEO called me directly. "Miss Foster, this is James Whitmore. I think it's time we had a conversation. Just the 2 of us." He wanted to meet in person. Said they needed to resolve this appropriately. His tone was careful, almost friendly. He hinted at a substantial settlement and public apology, suggested we could both walk away from this with dignity. We met at his office. Just him and me. No lawyers. He was in his 60s, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost $5,000. He offered me coffee, which I accepted because I hadn't eaten that day and the cream and sugar would help. "You've caused quite a bit of trouble for us," he said, smiling like we were old friends. "Your niece caused the trouble," I said. "I just refused to be her victim." His smile faltered. "Sharon has been struggling with mental health issues. The stress of her position, the demands we place on our managers. She made some poor choices, but I don't think she deserves to have her entire career destroyed." I saw it then. The way he was going to spin this. Sharon as the troubled employee, suffering from anxiety or depression or whatever diagnosis was convenient. The company as sympathetic, trying to help a struggling worker. Me as vindictive, unwilling to show compassion. "She fabricated evidence," I said. "She committed perjury. She systematically stole work from multiple employees over 6 years. That's not mental health struggles. That's calculated misconduct. I'm prepared to offer you $100,000, he said, leaning back in his chair. Cash settlement, public statement, clearing your name, and a positive reference. All you have to do is agree to drop the countersuit and sign an NDA. And Sharon will get the help she needs, he said carefully. Medical leave, treatment, a graceful exit from the company. I pulled out my phone and set it on the desk between us. What are you doing? He asked. Recording this conversation, I said. Arizona is a one-party consent state. I don't need your permission. His face went hard. That's not necessary. Your niece tried to destroy my life to protect her career, I said. Now you're trying to protect her from the consequences. You're offering me money to help you cover up 6 years of systematic fraud and abuse. I want that on record. He stood up abruptly. You're making a huge mistake, Miss Foster. We have resources you can't imagine. We can drag this through courts for the next 5 years. We can appeal every decision. We can make your life a living hell. You already did that, I said, standing too. And I'm still here. So let me make you a counteroffer. $300,000. Public statement with full details of what Sharon did. And Sharon terminated for cause. No medical leave, no graceful exit. She gets fired for fraud, and everyone knows why. That's not going to happen. Then I'll see you in court, I said. And I'll make sure every news outlet in Arizona knows that the CEO personally tried to cover up his niece's misconduct. I walked out of his office, got in my car, and realized I was shaking. Not from fear this time. From rage, from power, from the knowledge that I had them cornered, and they knew it. That night, sleeping in a library parking lot, I got an email from Garrett. Emergency board meeting scheduled at the company. Multiple members demanding answers about Sharon and the CEO's involvement. I think they're panicking. I smiled in the dark of my car and finally, for the first time in months, fell asleep. Without fear. The company collapsed faster than anyone expected. Within 1 week, everything changed. 2 major clients pulled contracts worth a combined $4.3 million annually. The board of directors demanded a full independent investigation into Sharon's conduct and the executive response to employee complaints. Garrett received word that multiple current employees had come forward with additional misconduct allegations. Marcus testified via video deposition from his new home in Colorado. He was calm, detailed, devastating. He walked through 6 years of documentation showing Sharon's systematic theft of employee work, her retaliation against anyone who challenged her, and the company's willful blindness to complaints. His testimony was 47 pages of single-spaced transcript, and every word was backed by documentary evidence. The independent investigator found that Sharon had taken credit for at least 18 major strategies over 6 years, all created by employees she supervised. She had falsified performance reviews to justify firing people who questioned her. She had altered company records to hide her misconduct. The report was 92 pages long and recommended immediate termination for cause. Sharon was fired on a Thursday afternoon. No severance package, no medical leave, no graceful exit. She lost her unvested stock options, which would have been worth approximately $90,000 in 2 more years. Her LinkedIn profile went dark the same day. Word spread quickly through the Phoenix marketing community. She was toxic now, unemployable. The CEO, James Whitmore, faced his own reckoning. The board discovered he had received 3 separate complaints about Sharon over 4 years and had dismissed all of them without investigation. When they learned he had personally attempted to negotiate a cover-up with me, offering hush money and protecting his niece, they forced him into early retirement. He left with his full benefits, which wasn't justice, but it was something. The company offered me a settlement of $325,000. Full public apology issued through a press release that acknowledged my contributions and cleared my name. An official statement that the allegations against me were false and based on fabricated evidence. Agreement to provide positive references to any potential employer who inquired. No non-disclosure agreement required. I accepted. The money hit my bank account on a Tuesday morning. I stared at the number. 6 figures. More money than I had ever seen in my life. I paid off all my debts within an hour. Credit cards, medical bills. The money I owed Emma. I had enough left over to breathe, to plan, to build. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Tempe. Nothing fancy but clean and quiet and mine. I bought a new laptop, restocked my business supplies, updated my website. Emma came over with homemade lasagna and a bottle of wine, and we sat on my new couch laughing until we cried. Jackson sent me a congratulatory text message. I read it, felt nothing, deleted it. Some people don't deserve space in your new life. Grace's bakery was thriving. She had expanded to a 2nd location and wanted Foster Strategy Group to handle marketing for both shops. Within 2 weeks of the settlement announcement, I signed 4 new corporate clients who had seen the news coverage. They were impressed by my integrity, my resilience, my willingness to fight for what was right even when it cost me everything. The publicity had made me locally famous as someone who stood up to corporate corruption. Business owners respected that. They wanted to work with someone who couldn't be bought or intimidated, who would fight for their interests the way I had fought for my own. I hired 2 employees. The first was a recent college graduate named Samantha, who reminded me of myself at 23. Hungry and talented, and eager to prove herself. I paid her well, gave her credit for her ideas, and made sure she knew her work mattered. The second was a social media specialist named Carlos, who had been laid off during the pandemic and was struggling to find opportunities. He brought creativity and experience that elevated every campaign we touched. Foster Strategy Group was fully booked 6 months out within a month of the settlement. Revenue hit $70,000 that first month, more than I had made in an entire year at my previous job. I started turning down clients because I didn't have capacity, which was a problem I had never imagined having 6 months ago. 6 months to the day after I walked out of Sharon's office, I stood in my own office space, small but professional, with a window overlooking downtown Tempe, a conference table where I met with clients, and a wall where I hung the Phoenix Business Journal article about the lawsuit. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. My email pinged. The sender was my former employer. I opened it, curious. They wanted to hire Foster Strategy Group as a consultant to help repair their damaged reputation. They were struggling to retain clients, facing ongoing PR problems, and needed fresh strategic thinking. The proposed contract was worth $45,000. I read the email 3 times, appreciating the irony. The company that tried to destroy me now needed me to save them. I replied in 2 sentences. Thank you for the opportunity. Unfortunately, Foster Strategy Group is currently at capacity and unable to take on new clients at this time. I didn't need their validation anymore. Didn't need to prove anything to them. I had already won by building something they couldn't touch. Something that existed independently of their approval or acknowledgement. Sharon's name occasionally came up in industry circles. She had moved to California, was working in retail management, her marketing career over. I felt no satisfaction hearing that. She had destroyed herself. I had just refused to let her destroy me in the process. The lesson I learned through 6 months of hell wasn't about respect or revenge or proving doubters wrong. It was about knowing your own value, even when everyone else tries to convince you otherwise. Sharon told me that respect was commanded by those who deserved it. She was wrong. Respect is earned through integrity, through fighting for what's right even when it costs you everything, through building something real instead of stealing credit for what others created. I almost gave up dozens of times. There were moments when settling seemed like the only rational choice, when the cost of fighting felt too high, when I was sure I couldn't survive another blow. But I kept going because quitting would have meant letting Sharon erase me, and I refused to be erased. The people who doubted me, who left when things got hard, who told me to give up, taught me the most valuable lesson. Trust yourself more than anyone else's opinion of you. Jackson thought I was destroying my life over a pointless grudge. Emma worried I was being stubborn for pride. My coffee shop manager and potential clients believed the lies about me. None of them could see what I knew in my core. That my work had value and Sharon was a fraud. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. I looked at my calendar, full of appointments with clients who respected my work, who valued my input, who treated me like the professional I was. My phone rang with another potential client, someone who had read about the lawsuit and wanted to work with someone who had the courage to fight for their principles. I answered with confidence, with joy, with the knowledge that I had built something real, and no one could take it away. This is Harriet Foster. How can I help you build something great? The future spread out before me, full of possibility, free from the need to prove anything to anyone. I had lost almost everything along the way: my relationship, my savings, my health, my stability. But I had gained something more valuable: absolute certainty in my own worth, and the knowledge that I could survive anything. Sharon tried to teach me that respect was commanded by those who deserved it. She was right about one thing: respect is commanded, but not through intimidation or theft or destroying others. It's commanded by integrity, by resilience, by refusing to compromise your values even when the price is steep. I had commanded respect by surviving her best attempts to break me and building something better than anything she had ever created. That was the real victory, not the money or the vindication or watching her fall. The victory was in becoming someone I respected, someone who fought for herself when no one else would, someone who built a life on her own terms. 6 months ago, I cleared my desk in silence and walked out with nothing but rage and fear. Today, I stood in my own company, surrounded by the evidence of what I had built from that rage, and I finally understood what I had been fighting for all along. Not respect from Sharon or my former employer or anyone who doubted me. Respect from myself. And that, it turned out, was the only respect that ever really mattered. Have you ever had to fight for what you knew was right even when everyone told you to give up? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more stories about resilience and triumph, and share this with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they know. Thank you so much for listening to my journey. I hope it reminds you that you're capable of surviving and thriving through anything life throws at you. Until next time, keep fighting for yourself, because you're worth it.